Assalamu alaikum. How are you all? I hope everybody is enjoying his time and have fun. Today we'll complete our lesson about infectious diseases. Last time we started to define infectious diseases and we said infectious diseases are diseases caused by pathogen and they can pass from one person to another. And we said the pathogens can be bacteria, viruses, protozoa, fungi, and parasites. We took one example to explain about it, and our example was the corona disease, which is caused by COVID-19 virus. It's a very important example to talk about, especially when we are suffering from this virus these days. Scientists, after or before discovering the microscope, before building the microscope, they couldn't able to see what are the microorganisms. They couldn't see bacteria or viruses or whatever. So they thought that, or they found that some diseases, when one person have it, it can pass to others, and it start to pass through the whole community. They said, sure, there is something which is passing, move from one person to another, and cause the healthy person to get sick. What is this? They couldn't see it. They couldn't recognize it, but they proposed or they thought it is a microorganism. This was all before discovering the microscope, but they couldn't identify which organism caused which disease, and they couldn't do this until a scientist called Koch. He started to make his experiments to find out how microorganisms cause diseases. First of all, the scientists established the germ theory, which states that some microorganisms are pathogens, which means some microorganisms cause diseases. But this was just like they think this happened, but they were not sure, and they couldn't be sure until Robert Koch started to do its experiments. So what was the Robert Koch experiment? In the past, a disease called anthrax caused cattle to die, and he started to work on this disease, anthrax, which infects only cattle and some sheep, and clearly it infects some human beings. So what did Koch do? First of all, he took sample from the cattle that die with the anthrax. What he found there? He found a type of bacteria. He started to isolate this bacteria and grow it inside the laboratory in clean environment. After developing and after growing this bacteria, he started to inject the bacteria to a new and a healthy cattle. What happened to the healthy cattle? Think, yes, sure, it had the anthrax. The cattle started to develop the symptoms of anthrax. Again, he started to take a sample from the new infected cattle, and he started to grow this sample and deal with this sample again with the same way he dealt with the sample he took from the first cattle. What he found the same bacteria is growing, and the same result will happen if he injects the new bacteria to a new cattle. So what happened? He found, or he took a sick animal and he isolates the bacteria from this animal. Now I cannot decide this bacteria caused the anthrax. I have to prove that. I have to prove this bacteria caused the anthrax. How can I prove this? If I get a healthy cattle and I inject or introduce this bacteria to its body, this cattle must develop the disease. Otherwise, I can say simply this bacteria doesn't cause anthrax. But Koch saw that the bacteria which is isolated from the first sick animal, which is the cattle which dealt with the anthrax, when I isolated this bacteria and we grow it inside the lab in a clean environment, and I inject the new grown bacteria into another cattle, the cattle started to develop the disease. which means this bacteria causes the disease in the first cattle, and again it caused the same disease in this new cattle. He allowed this cattle to have the cycle of the disease, then it starts to isolate the bacteria again. And again it will grow it inside the lab and see what's the result. The result is identical bacteria like the one he isolated in the beginning. Now coaches can say that this bacteria causes the anthrax. This is the steps which should be taken in the case of any disease and any pathogen. So Koch's experiments established and published with some steps should be done as rules to prove this disease is caused by this virus or by this pathogen. So let's take our example and explain how can we do this, or how can we prove. How did we prove corona is caused by COVID-19? First of all, each patient, each person who have corona, they found that it carried the virus COVID-19. So this is the first clue. All the people who have corona, they have the virus COVID-19. They took this virus, they take the sample from the patients and start to grow the virus in a clean and clear environment in the laboratory, and they start to inject the grown virus into a healthy, not persons in this case, they started to inject it to rabbits or rats or something like this. And they found that this animal is developing the disease. They isolate again from the new animal, the new patient, the new sick animal, the virus, and they started to grow it again, and they found that the same virus is grown, which means COVID-19 is the reason for corona disease, because it's found in each single case that has the disease, and when we isolate it and inject it to a new organism, the new organism developed the disease. So to say about any virus or any bacteria or any microorganism, this microorganism cause that disease, we need to follow Koch's postulates, which are these postulates, postulate 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we have to follow them in the same sequence. We cannot take one step before another. We have to follow the same postulates. If all the postulates happen and proved, it means this microorganisms cause this virus. So the first one is the suspected pathogen. The pathogen that I have a doubt about it caused the disease or not, must be isolated from each single case, each single host. So the suspected pathogen must be isolated from the diseased host in every case of the disease. In every case of corona, I have to find COVID-19. Otherwise, if I don't find, it means COVID-19 is not the reason for corona. But if I find in each single patient who have corona, and if I find each single, that's why we are doing the test. If each single patient have the corona, have the COVID virus, it means this COVID virus is the reason for corona disease. The second step, the suspected pathogen must be grown in a pure culture or artificial media in the laboratory. So I have a clean and clear version. I have a clean one. So I don't have any contaminations. So maybe this contamination is the reason for the disease, not the virus itself. So we are growing the virus in a pure culture to make sure this virus or this pathogen or this microorganism is the reason for the disease. Then we take the pathogen from the pure culture and inject it to a new host, and this host should develop the disease. The suspected pathogen must be isolated again from the new host, grown again in a pure culture, and the same results that we have in the first experiment should be found again. So here, in this case, we can say this microorganism cause this disease. Otherwise, I cannot just say COVID-19 caused corona. How can I prove this? I have to go through the 4 postulates to be able to say clearly this virus caused this disease. Is it clear? I hope it's clear. Today we talk about germ theory, which is established by some scientists, and germ theory states that some microorganisms are pathogens. But how can I say this microorganism caused this disease by going through the Koch's postulates? I have to prove this pathogen cause this disease, or this microorganism cause this disease. To make sure and to prove that, I have to go through the 4 postulates of Koch in the same sequence as we started. Thank you for your listening. Please visit your book, page 716 to 717. You will find what did we say today. And if you have any inquiry, any doubt, any misconception, please ask me directly. You can contact with me through the email and even sending messages. Thank you for your listening. Inshallah, meet you soon.